Hello, I'm Errin Haines, editor-at-large for the 19th, and welcome to Day 5 of the 19th Represents. Today, we're in conversation with somebody who you may have seen in the headlines a bit this week. Senator Kamala Harris of California was announced Tuesday as the 2020 Democratic vice presidential nominee, a historic choice that ended months of speculation over which of the qualified, capable, and talented women Joe Biden would select as his running mate. Senator Harris, we're so excited that you could join us for your first extended conversation since joining the ticket. Thanks so much for being here.
I am so happy to be with you, Errin, and on purpose, my first interview as a teammate and a running mate with Joe Biden is with the 19th. So thank you. It's good to be with you.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by. Listen, I know so many of the people out here watching today are wanting to hear directly from you about how we got to this moment. So let's talk about this deep stakes process, which must have been even more nerve-wracking and high stakes for you than it was for all of us who were watching from the outside. I want to start by asking you how your name came up for this role. I mean, is this something that you told Joe Biden that you were interested in, or did he approach you?
Well, first of all, let me say I've been very honored through the process to be in the conversation among, to your point, so many incredibly talented women. And I have worked with almost all of them. We should be very proud that among the leaders of our nation, there are so many accomplished, brilliant, talented women. And to even be mentioned in that group was an honor. And of course, to be asked by Joe Biden to be his running mate is an incredible honor. And I will tell you, I'm so excited about Joe's platform and him as a person. And we're going to get this done. We're going to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned those talented women, many of whom you worked with, some of whom you ran against last year. What was it like to be in competition with so many of the women that you knew, worked with, and respected? And did you talk to any of them during this process? And did that add to the pressure and anxiety of this process at all for you?
Well, I don't think, I'll speak for myself, but I think I'm speaking for all of us. I don't think any of us thought of ourselves as being in competition with each other. And many of us have worked together, sometimes for years. And it really was about, and I know this to be true, a pride that we all had, knowing that when we were running, for example, we weren't the only woman on that stage, that we were representing a picture about what the leadership of this country is and should be going forward, and in a way that is also inspiring of all the women who will come after us, who know that their righteous place on that stage. So I don't think we ever really thought of it as a competition, as much as really a collective sense of pride that we were all on that stage together, showing the diversity among who we are as women, and really, I think, in many ways challenging folks who may not have ever imagined that to see what that looks like. And it was a real point of pride and joy for me to be with those women on that stage.
Well, I know, we've talked before about, your belief that there should have been a woman on the ticket, period, whether it was going to be in the number 1 or number 2 spot. Certainly, with Joe Biden declaring this spring that should he become the nominee, he was going to put a woman on the ticket, was very exciting for the majority of the electorate, women in this country. And, as that conversation continued, there was some talk about whether, who that woman should be. Should that be a woman of color, and specifically a Black woman? I want to ask you, I mean, did you feel that Joe Biden needed to choose a Black woman or a woman of color as his running mate? And is that something that you talked to him about at any point in this process?
Well, let's sit back and think about this. Joe Biden had the audacity to choose a Black woman to be his running mate. How incredible is that? And what a statement about Joe Biden, that he decided that he was going to do that thing that was about breaking one of the most substantial barriers that has existed in our country, and that he made that decision with whatever risk that brings. I think, as much as anything, it's a statement about the character of the man that we're going to elect as the next president of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that as a risk. I mean, there are some people who have asked me, if they thought that Joe Biden was making the safe choice by doing that. I certainly don't agree with the premise of that question, but I wonder what you think about the risk that is that is the choice that he made, that he did choose you, and he is making a historic choice. There's never been a Black woman nominated for vice president as on a major party ticket before.
Right, and so that it's a statement, I think, about the vision that Joe Biden has about who we are as a nation and the future of our nation. And that's one of the things, frankly, about who he is that gives me such excitement about the Biden-Harris ticket. Because the Biden-Harris ticket is about an agenda that is about representing who America really is, and knowing that among us there may be those who seemingly have nothing in common but have everything in common. Joe Biden knows that. And it is also about saying that this is going to be an administration, the Biden-Harris administration, that is focused on the future of our country, motivated by what can be, unburdened by what has been.
Yeah, you talked about that even during your presidential campaign, just the idea of what this does for the American imagination, to see somebody that comes in a package like yours standing for this office.
Errin, let me also say this. I am not unique. There are a lot of people like me. There are a lot of folks where I come from. I come from people. And that is part of the point. Maybe it is for some to stimulate their imagination, but for others, what we know is that this is actually who we are. Yes. and what we are. And it is a statement that is an affirmation about who we truly are. And this in the face of the current president of the United States, who has spent full time trying to sow hate and division in our country. And again, when we're looking at this election, which is coming up in 80-something days, there is a clear contrast between the current occupant of the White House and that administration and the Biden-Harris ticket. And a lot of it has to do with not only about unity, but it has to do about really knowing who the people of our country are, and it being focused on them, and it being about them, and it being about working families, it being about childcare, being about making sure people have jobs, that they have health care. These are the things that really are what this ticket is about, focused on who the American people really are and what they really want.
Yeah. I want you to tell us, if you can, about your final interview with Joe Biden. When did it happen? Where was it? How long did it last? I mean, how would you describe it? I would think it would probably have been the hardest and most important job interview of your life.
It was a really wonderful conversation. Joe and I, we share many experiences, believe it or not, and values. We both care deeply about family, deeply. Joe has he has known suffering, and it is, well known about the people he loved the most, who he has lost. He and I have a shared experience in that way. We have talked about the importance of supporting the dignity of work and working people, including organized labor and collective bargaining. He and I, both having gone through the healthcare system with people we love, have talked about the need for making sure that nobody is denied health coverage. And that's such a big signature part of his plan, as opposed to the current occupant of the White House, who's got his lawyers in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which President Obama and Vice President brought health care to tens of millions of people. And under Trump, it might be taken away. These are the things that he and I talked about. And it really is about being grounded in values that are a combination of hope and vision, and faith and commitment and hard work. And it was an incredible conversation that we have continued to have. I'm here in Delaware right now. Doug, my husband, and Jill and Joe, we have been spending time together. We've been talking about our families, about our kids, and about the children of our country. And it's really exciting, Errin. It really is truly exciting.
Yeah. I mean, can you say when that final interview was with him?
It was before it was announced.
Yes, that is certainly an answer. Well, I mean, we've talked about the dual pandemics of coronavirus and systemic racism that have been roiling us for several months now. I mean, it felt like the criteria changed so much for those of us on the outside looking in, kind of in terms of what Joe Biden might need as a campaigning and a governing partner should he win in November. I wonder if that changed what you thought that the case was for what you potentially brought to this ticket in this administration.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the Biden-Harris agenda is a shared agenda. For example, Joe had a whole plan that was, his Build Back Better plan about the economy, but it includes understanding the connection between the creation of jobs and also bringing dignity and support to working families, right? And so, for example, one of the parts of the Build Back Better plan is to bring healthcare and home healthcare to seniors and to people who need it. And then, but also make sure that caregivers are being paid a livable and a righteous wage and getting all the benefits in terms of workers' benefits. So in that plan, he adopted the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, which is something I've been working on for a couple of years. And when we talk about domestic workers, be clear, we are talking about predominantly women of color who are spending hours upon hours, night and day, taking care of other people's children, other people's parents and grandparents. And the Biden-Harris plan is about saying they too deserve dignity and support for the work that they do. It ranges to what we have as a shared commitment around addressing the climate crisis. And so there's a whole plan that is about creating 1 million jobs in terms of investing in an infrastructure for renewable energy, but also with a focus on making sure communities of color and our indigenous brothers and sisters are part of the plan, knowing that in America today, in communities that have some of the worst health quality or air quality, 70% of the people living there are people of color. So these are the components of the plan, the overall plan for Building Back Better. And it really is a shared commitment that is about paying attention to racial disparities, paying attention to gender disparities, and also paying attention to what we need to do to grow back our country in a way that we can actually, again, aspire to the ideals that we have yet to meet, but can move closer toward.
You mentioned your husband, Doug, and
yes.
At the end of your speech on Wednesday, you were joined by Doug, whom both you and Joe Biden mentioned during the event. Now, I remember seeing Doug quite a bit on the campaign trail.
Yes.
But I suspect we may hear from Doug more in the coming days as he introduces himself to the country and prepares for the prospect of taking on a historic role himself, that of second man.
Isn't that something?
What can you say? Is he up for the job? I mean, can we expect to see him playing a large role in this general election campaign?
I have to tell you, I married a man who is so supportive and encouraging of women, period, but so supportive. Doug is comfortable being behind the scenes or being next to me or being in front of me. He's comfortable. He loves his family. He loves my cooking. And he loves our country. And, he and Jill have an incredible relationship. They bonded actually when we were all running. And I do believe that their relationship is a very special one that America is also going to witness. Yeah.
Well, also in your remarks on Wednesday, you gave a nod to the heroic and ambitious women that came before you.
Yeah.
I remember when you announced your candidacy for president, you did so in the pioneering spirit of Shirley Chisholm.
Yeah.
You talked about your mother, Shamala.
Yeah.
As we prepare to mark the centennial of women's suffrage, obviously our newsroom is named for the 19th Amendment, but with an asterisk for the women who were omitted from full access to the franchise, until
1965, right? Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering about your thoughts on how this moment intersects with your own historic candidacy.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that. When I think about, obviously, the centennial and the importance of acknowledging the accomplishment, but also how recent it is and how much we still have to do to achieve equity when you look at issues like pay equity, something that Joe Biden talks about and we're going to deal with in our administration. There's a lot to celebrate in terms of the accomplishment, but also it should motivate us to also be clear-eyed about what yet has to be done in the unfinished business. But the other way I think about it is as a proud HBCU graduate, and in particular from Howard University, because I was recently looking at some of the photographs and listening to some of the stories as a reminder of the fact that there were Howard and other HBCU women, but Howard women, as Howard is in DC, who were demanding, along with those other suffragettes, the right for women's enfranchisement and the right to vote. And there are beautiful photographs of Howard women meeting with President Woodrow Wilson to demand that women have access to the polls. And so when I think about this centennial, I do also think about the fact that let's be reminded about the ability of women also at every stage to build coalition and to fight together. But let's also acknowledge the disparities that still exist based on race. And let's all work on that together as those suffragettes did 100 years ago.
My first story for the 19th was actually about you and your campaign last year and issues of race and gender and frankly, how they play out in our politics. You obviously ran as the lone Black woman in a very crowded Democratic presidential primary. I'm wondering, just to hear from you about how the role of race and gender, how you saw that play out in your campaign and how that experience, your qualifications and your lived experience, how you bring those lessons to the fight ahead in this general election and how you may govern going forward.
Yeah. I mean, your question and your point brings me back to the point about the courage and the commitment that Joe Biden has had to ask me to be his running mate. Because to your point, I'm the only Black woman in the United States Senate, the only one. And only the second in the history of the United States Senate. And so when we look again at how far we have to go, we have a lot of work to do. And by Joe asking me to be his running mate, he has pushed forward something that might have otherwise taken decades if you just track the progress that we've had so far. And what it means is it is the significance of it is an understanding by Joe and our, what will be, God willing, our administration, about the need to be conscious about the disparities that exist, be conscious about the systemic racism that exists, be conscious about the active and affirmative acts that must take place to actually get closer to an equitable and fair society. And I think that that's something that folks really should see in the significance of, again, this ticket, which is that this is a statement about the fact that we're not going to just wait for somebody to give us permission. We're not going to just wait for some broad consensus where everyone feels like, oh yeah, that's normal, I'm comfortable with it. Sometimes we have to get out of our comfort zone to do what is right, to move forward. The issues in particular that you address in the 19th Amendment that are about women and women of color, so that we can get where we need to go. Yeah.
If you become the first female vice president in the history of this country, what specifically can we expect you to fight for the women of this country?
Everything. I mean, listen, I said this back on that cold day in January in 2017 at the Women's March, which is every issue is a woman's issue and women's issues should be everyone's issues. And so when I think about women's issues, I think about, and in fact, I'll tell you, Errin, so, I've been the first woman to be elected to most of the positions I've had. And so these journalists would come up to me with this very creative question. And they put a microphone in front of my face and they'd say, so tell us, what's it like to be the first woman, fill in the blank? And I'd look at them and I'd say, you know, I'm so glad you asked that question. Because certainly, you know, I don't know what to tell you because, I mean, I've always been a woman.
Right.
But I'm sure a man could do the job just as well, right? Or people would say, well, talk to us about women's issues. And I'd say, you know, I am so glad you want to talk about the economy.
Right.
Or sometimes I'd say, I'm so glad you want to talk about healthcare. Or I'm so glad you want to talk about national security. I'm so glad you want to talk about the climate crisis. I'm so glad you want to talk about immigration, right? And so I will say this, that in a Biden-Harris administration, women are going to be a priority, understanding that women have many priorities, and all of them must be acknowledged. And, but it will certainly start with it being very clear-eyed about the disproportionate weight that women carry on certain issues. We could talk about equity, but let's also talk about the weight that women carry of responsibility. Women are primary caregivers to children and their parents and seniors. So that's why we need to have paid family leave. That is a priority of the Biden-Harris administration and will be. It is about what we need to do to have affordable childcare. That is a priority. Going back to what I said about what we need to do to have assistance for seniors who want to live in their homes and give them the support and the caregiving they need in their homes. These are the kinds of priorities that have been part of the first policy initiatives that have been offered in this campaign. And those will continue, understanding, again, women carry a disproportionate burden for a lot of those responsibilities. And so we need to recognize that and fix the problem.
Yeah, well, we at the 19th could not agree more that all issues are women's issues. And
Yes.
so thank you for underscoring and reminding people about that. I also wonder, you know, now that you've been tapped for this role, I wonder if that changes your own ambitions for your political future. What does this mean for other women across the country who may be thinking about their political ambitions and what is possible?
Oh, I mean, listen, I've told you before, my mother raised me with many sayings, and one of them is she said, Kamala, you may be the first to do many things. Make sure you're not the last. And I take that as my duty. I feel a great sense of personal responsibility to make sure that when we walk through those doors, that we widen those doors and then help, you know, each one pull one, not just widen the door and then keep walking, but each one pull one, so that we can, again, make it the case that no longer are we just making these firsts and celebrating these firsts. These are celebrations worth having. But, you know, in 2020, I think we all would agree that we would like that we are no longer having the first woman in any position, but many women in those positions.
Yes, well, to your point about not being the last Black woman to represent the state of California out of the US Senate, should you become the next Vice President of the United States, your Senate seat will be open. Are there Black women who you would like to see possibly succeeding you in that seat, should you elevate to the number 2 position in the country?
Listen, I think that, again, there are 100 United States senators. This should not just be about California. This is a national issue. If I am, we should all sit back and say, how is it that when you look at the role of Black women in the history of building our country, much less in the history of even most recent politics, much less, you know, historically, it is inexcusable that we would not have full representation in the United States Congress. And so this should not just be about any one state. We should be saying this across the nation, because there are so many talented Black women and women of color, period, who are on that path, and they should be encouraged. I want to say that we should encourage and always support women who are running for office, and support them, knowing that even if they are the first, that they are the one that is necessary for us to continue to break these barriers. I have not achieved anything that I have without the support of many who believed in the possibility of someone who has never been there before being there. And that's what we have to do across the nation.
I want to also talk about November, this election. We're obviously seeing concerns over voter suppression, voter depression, possibly, and the need for voter turnout, the kind of turnout that you all are going to need to win in November, even in the midst of a pandemic. Certainly, I'm seeing a lot of Black women in particular who are galvanized by the announcement of your joining this ticket. What do you think Black women in particular are going to do in November in terms of turning out in the midst of this pandemic? What do you think that your addition to this ticket does to excite and energize the base of the Democratic Party?
Well, I think listen, there is that piece of it that is a point of pride, but listen, Black women pay attention to the issues. Black women are motivated to vote for the people who represent their priorities and their needs. And so when you look at everything that relates to what we have discussed in terms of childcare, when you look at what we are talking about in terms of jobs, when you talk about healthcare, when you look at what we need to do to address racial and not only disparities, right, in terms of the healthcare system, in terms of the economy, in terms of the education system, but what we need to do to also speak about systemic racism. When you have one ticket that can say the phrase Black Lives Matter, and another who has been full-time sowing hate and division in our country, those are the things that are going to motivate Black women to vote. There will be a point of pride. You don't want to have any false modesty about a Black woman being on the ticket. But it takes more than just that to motivate Black women to vote. People have to speak to their issues. And the Biden-Harris ticket does that.
Yeah. You certainly have been somebody that's been out in the protests during the Black Lives Matter movement that we've seen return this summer with the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. And yet we see, a climate that is racialized and a president that has already kind of returned to a racial playbook headed into November. We've said during this past year that racism is on the ballot for a lot of Americans. And Joe Biden has said that this is a battle for the soul of America. What does that mean to you? And how concerned are you about this national reckoning and how it may play out in our election for voters?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Joe says and has been saying, this is a battle for the soul of our country. And when we look at someone like the current occupant of the White House, again, he has not been lifting folks up. Joe and what we are about is about lifting people up, understanding that the strength of a leader is based on not who you beat down, but who you lift up. And these are the things that are at stake right now. And when we talk about the election in November, this is probably one of the most important elections of our lifetime. Literally, this is probably one of the most important elections of our lifetime. This is about everything, every issue that we discussed, and whether we're going to have a president of the United States who actually works to lift folks up and give you a sense of pride in your country, or somebody who is just full-time, just beating people down. And I fear that if we don't correct course, the damage will be irreversible. Everything is on the line in this election, so many things. And so here's what I'll say about voting, Errin. There are states and there are state legislatures who, especially after the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act, have put in place laws that have been designed to suppress the vote, and in particular the Black vote, students from voting, Indigenous people from voting. And those obstacles, some of them we're going to fight against and get rid of before the election. Some of them are still going to be in place. So here's the thing. Everybody has to remember this and ask this question of yourself. Why don't they want us to vote? Why don't they want us to vote? Why are they creating obstacles to us voting? Well, the answer is because when we vote, things change. When we vote, things get better. When we vote, we address the disparities we have been talking about. We address the need of all people to be treated with dignity and respect. These are the things that are on the line in this election. And so we know how to jump over or get around the obstacles that for many of us have been in place since the day we were born. And that's going to be the job ahead of us in the next 80-something days, to jump over those obstacles and to make sure our voices are heard and counted in this election.
Well, I can't think of a better note to end on at the 19th than a conversation about the importance of voting. Thank you so much, Senator Harris, for this conversation. You covered a lot of ground today. I appreciate you taking a detour from the campaign trail to chat with us about this historic moment for you. Thank you so much, and good luck out there.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Errin. All right. Thank you, 19.